I like, applied early decision to Brown. It was like my dream school. I got in and I was like, by this point was like severely anorexic and depressed. And like, then I came out the other side not knowing how to validate myself, where I'm like, okay, well, like, what's the next like college to get into? There was no off ramp for me. That pipeline, the way it wired my brain, it has not been healthy or happy.
I want to start today's segment by quoting a tweet from one of our panelists. Alyssa, I think you'll recognize this because I think I've brought this tweet up before. Belle, there goes the baker with his tray like always. Baker, well, there goes Belle singing her daily mean song about us. That's Dana Schwartz.
It's a throwback.
It's a throwback from Dana Schwartz. Dana is a New York Times bestselling author. Her new book, Immortality: A Love Story, is available for pre-order. Pre-order it. It helps.
It helps so much. The publishing people are just like on their knees being like, Dana, please tell the people to pre-order. So I'm telling you, please.
The holidays are coming up. You can just like give a printout of the beautiful cover art and be like, this is what I've pre-ordered for you for Christmas.
It's thoughtful. It really is.
It's like you found a printer. You found a printer and you printed something out for me. And you also pre-ordered a book. It's a very good book. So Dana, we're really excited to have you today. Rounding out the panel, her podcast, That's Messed Up, an SVU podcast, is coming to the Midwest in November. And her show, Better Half Comedy, is in LA every Wednesday. Klenk, welcome to Hysteria.
Thanks for having me back, guys. It's always a shock every time I get the invite to return.
How you been? What have you been up to?
I have been touring with my podcast. So I actually just left. I just got back 2 days ago, and I was gone for 9 days, which is the longest I've ever left my kids before. But my husband was able to fly his parents in to obviously help him because men can do nothing alone. But yeah, it was great. It was really fun. We started in DC and then we were in like North Carolina, Alabama, Atlanta, and Nashville. And it was great. It was fun to meet all the people that listen and, get out on the road.
Do you ever find that when you immerse yourself too much in like crime media that you start to have like nightmares about crime?
Oh, of course. Yes. Completely. We used to like research the crimes right before bed and I started having nightmares and I was like, I gotta stop doing that. My co-host Lisa makes fun of me because I'm always like, now that I have kids, SVU hits a little different. And she's like, oh, so child murder was okay before? And I'm like, no, it wasn't. But now I have like a specific two children that I care about that I'm like, the world is terrible. But, obviously I still keep plugging along because I do love the show and the content. But yes, that stuff does fully give me nightmares. And I think you just get more paranoid in general. Like, I don't know. You're like, what's that guy doing? Just like,
Right. I don't like the cut of his jib.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the reason I brought up Dana's tweet at the top of this segment is because today we're talking about like projecting intelligence, and the first fictional character that came to mind when we were talking about signifying intelligence was Belle from Beauty and the Beast, who really, the longer I sit with this animated film that I first watched in 1994, I want to say, the more I'm like, Belle really was high on the smell of her own farts. She really thought that she was like the smartest person ever. It also kind of came to mind this week because we were talking about like book talk and the importance of TikTok and social media in selling books and selling yourself as a reader of books. So I want to kind of get into the ways that we project intelligence or make an effort to look smart, and whether those things are like obnoxious or actual helpful social adaptations. Alyssa, have you ever tried to look smart? That sounds like a very mean question. Have you ever even tried?
No, it's fine because now I look like me. But yes, I did for many, many years try to look smart. I mean, there was like the forced professionalism of being a paralegal, which was like, you must just wear a suit. That was different. But like one of my most embarrassing / heartening exchanges with Barack Obama when I first started working for him was when it was 2006 and we were traveling all across the place for the midterms. And I would keep a copy of The Economist magazine with my real magazines inside. And I had People, I had In Touch. I mean, let's be honest, it wasn't People. It was like In Touch, Entertainment Weekly,
A fine
Star,
publication.
Obviously. And
Star.
yeah,
Alyssa, not
Star.
Entertainment Weekly
It
does
was
not
20
go in the
years
same
ago,
category.
Kara.
Alyssa, Star is like a glossy National Enquirer.
Star had better
No.
pictures. Anyway, I thought that he was asleep in the back of the car where we were driving. And so I took out The Economist, but took out my real magazines. And he's like, you think I didn't know this? One eye open. He's like, you think I didn't know this? And then we were both like reading the magazines together. He's like, I don't like you and trust you because I think you read The Economist. And I was like, okay, that's good. But that went on for a long time before he found me out. It was like The Economist, The Atlantic, like you name it. I tried to look like I was as smart as I could be.
Yeah. Dana, I would love to hear your thoughts on signifying intelligence, because I feel like you have a lot of opinions on Belle and a lot of opinions on Belle-like characteristics in other people. So what, in your mind, is looking smart? Like, what is that? How does that manifest?
I guess I want to make everything I'm about to say, it like comes from a place of self-loathing and insecurity. Like, I do think genuinely a lot of the things that like make me uncomfortable is because it reminds me of myself. And like, I think I have a bad attention span, and like, I don't think I'm smart enough or well-read enough, or I think I should dress better. And so, yeah, I definitely see on TikTok, because I'm a youthful child where, you know, I belong on TikTok among my peers. There's like the trend of like dark academia where people are dressing like they're Oxford grad students. Like, that's the aesthetic. Like, look like you're studying at Oxford, and like books as aesthetic is like a big thing, where it's like, I think a lot of social media is like curating a persona that you can put out in the world that's palatable. Like, one of them is like that girl, or like it girl, where it's like, you know, like dewy, you know, skincare skin and green smoothies, reading the New Yorker, walking on the subway, cool coats. Like, I do think that people, when they don't really know themselves, try to curate an aesthetic in the hopes that then the personality will follow. I do want to point out I have rainbow organized bookshelves, which people don't think is a signifier of intelligence, because it's like, oh, she's just using the books as an aesthetic. But it's just because I have a brain that I need to organize things, and I thought it looked nice.
I did clock that. I did clock that because I knew what we were talking about today. And if I may interrupt for 2 seconds, I was originally such a judgy bitch about people doing that. I was like, oh, is that like how your books are organized by color? And now I fully have a shelf like that in my house. It just looks nice. It was just like a better way that like they just don't look good, like the ones that are out for the public. You know?
I just saw, I mean, I had like obviously seen it on Instagram and thought it looked cute. And it was like pandemic days. And I used to live in a studio apartment where like my bookshelves were the only thing on that wall. And so I was like, oh, well, it also has to be decor. And also it was very fun for me to like take all and like very cathartic to like take all the books out of the shelf and like put them back in order. And now, I mean, it's sort of all over the place. And like, I have books all over my house that aren't organized, but this shelf is sort of the remnant of it. Like, you know, this other shelf is just nonsense.
Kara, have you ever put effort into like looking smart or projecting intelligence publicly?
These aren't real glasses. These glasses are fake. No, I'm kidding. They are real
I was
glasses.
like,
I was like, whoa.
No. Actually, I knew a girl that did that in college, and I deeply, deeply like judged her for it. I was like, I cannot believe you wear glasses that are fake. Like, they were just glasses. I don't think I've ever done like a physical outward projection of intelligence that I can think of. Like, but I don't curate my Instagram in the way that I know what Dana's talking about exactly, but I don't think I have the time or the eye for it, you know? I just don't have the eye to make myself look better than I am on Instagram. But I definitely have like a similarly fraught relationship with wanting to seem intelligent, feeling like I'm never as smart as the other people in the room and things like that. But I don't think I I don't know. I only started wearing glasses like 7 years ago, and I feel like it sort of did inform a little bit about like what people think of me, at least on stage or like when they see me. And I didn't even realize that was going to happen, but I think it does a little bit, you know?
I will confess, in my like cringier days when I was trying to like curate my Instagram more like conscientiously, I would like, go to a coffee shop and like get the latte and like spread open my book and like take a picture of it, even if I was only going to like read 3 pages and then be on my phone. Like, I definitely did it. But I think it was as much a signifier to the outside world as a signifier to me that like, I'm insecure about my own whatever, and I want to be this sort of person.
Mm-hmm. I think it's easy to think about like, I mean, back when I was maybe, I guess like in my 20s, this was kind of in the analog days or just the beginning of social media before people were really curating a persona on social media. But there were signifiers back then that people would kind of like books as decor, like a copy of Infinite Jest in a place of prominence on your bookshelf, like some Thomas Pynchon novels that with mysteriously uncreased spines. Like,
see, I could never do that because I live in utter fear that the entire world is just the Socratic method and that someone would come into my house and be like, oh, tell me about that book. And I'd be like, I never read it. I never read it. I am sorry. So I really, even on my desk right here, I have all these books. This office is full of books. You don't see any of them because I don't want anyone being like, what did you think of that one, Alyssa?
Now, when I get done reading books, unless they're like one of my very most favorite books, I usually just like get rid of them. I give them away, or there's like a bookstore in Echo Park in Los Angeles that sells used books, but it's like a really important part of the community. So I'll give my used books to them to sell, and they'll give me like a $10 gift card, and I'll get like a coffee or whatever. But I don't really have a lot of books in my house that I have already read. So if someone comes over and they're like, what do you think of Vertigo, the book about Mexico City? I'd be like, I haven't read it yet. These are all aspirations for myself.
Oh, interesting. I definitely have. I am married to a bookophile. Like my husband they are his sports, they are his porn. Like books are everything to him. Like if he sees one of our kids pick up one of his books, he's like, no. Like book. He always tells them books are precious. But like, and I have instituted a 1 in, 1 out policy with him because he just buys so many books that I'm like, we got to get rid of some of these. So now I have this love-hate relationship with books where I'm like, they're everywhere. But he, like, there's some he likes to keep. But I will admit that I have books that I kept that I've read that I'm like, oh, these do make me look smart to like keep these on my section of the bookshelf, which is very small compared to his. But I'll be like, oh, back in your mind, you're like, I took a class on Dante. I have all of Dante's Inferno and Paradise and Purgatory. I have the whole thing. And I like have those books there. And it's like, what am I going to like reopen Dante one day? Probably not. But I'm like, oh, this will spark a conversation about how I studied abroad. Like, I don't know. It's so lame.
But those are almost like, I mean, this kind of brings up something that's, I think, important. Like, should we hide the fact that we've done those things? Like, that's cool. That's like a trophy. That's like a smart person merit badge. Dana,
it's like a memory, right? It's like a fridge magnet from this time. Like I have a lot of books that I either haven't read yet or read once and will never read again, but like they remind me of a specific time. Signed books that I got when I was like 16 as a gift, or like books that I remember because I like interviewed the author for EW, or like things that like evoke a specific period where it's like I keep them more as like relics than things I want to read again necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Marie Kondo would really disapprove. Well, no, it's sparking joy.
No, because it's sparking joy for you. Yeah.
She did say you're supposed to have like 10 books. It's something insane.
Oh, Marie.
When we were researching this topic, I was thinking a lot about this episode of MTV Cribs. Do you guys remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So there's an episode with MTV Cribs that really stuck out to me that had Moby on it. Remember the DJ?
Of course.
The bald.
Natalie Portman stalker.
Yeah.
Do you know,
guy.
randomly, I know like 5 people who have hooked up with Moby. They're all like friends of friends, but like I know so many people are like, oh, my friend hooked up with Moby.
For a while, I knew a bunch of people who had all hooked up with the guy who played on
Oh yeah, he was everywhere in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
For a
Oh,
while.
really?
Yeah.
That's
I mean, and
unlikely.
good for him
Unexpected.
though. Good for him though. I mean, he did great. He took that role and he
ran with it.
He did great with, and I didn't hear any creepy stories about him. Just like, yep, we hooked up. It's like, good
Just
for
that
you.
he's out there.
That's great.
Yeah, he's out
He's
there.
doing research. He's on a show called Girls. He needs to know about girls.
Yeah, so in this episode of MTV Cribs with Moby in it, Moby has this very insufferable moment, surprise, surprise, where he goes over to his bookshelf and he's like, I just think on this show, nobody ever has any books in their house, so I'm going to tell you about my books.
I've watched a few of these cribs, and the thing that seems strange to me, it doesn't seem like anyone has a bookshelf. I'm kind of concerned that people aren't reading anymore. Probably the first book I ever fell in love with when I was really young is The Hobbit.
That has always stuck out to me as like one of the most insufferable moments in MTV history. And I just was, what's the difference between a person who, like, you know, communicates their love of books or reading or, you know, analog consumption of content, for as like a social signifier to like make friends and connect with people, and someone who's just doing it to feel superior? Alyssa, you're sort of like looking
No, because
thoughtful.
I mean that's the distinction. You know what I mean? Like Dana saying, "Look, I love my books. I have these books. I color code." Like all of us have things that we love, but we love them because we love them, not for the sake of being loved for loving them, right? And that's the difference with what you just said about Moby. If he had said in MTV Cribs, "You know what I'm so proud of? You know, look at these books. I've read all these books and it's something I'm so proud of." That is cool. Saying everyone who has been on this show before me is a dolt and I am so smart. I am the diversity in your series because look at all of these books. That is the difference.
Did you guys see the Architectural Digest, I think, tour with Ashley Tisdale?
No,
I did not.
It sort of went viral for a minute because she was like showing off her brand new house and she had all these bookshelves filled with books. And she was like, I'm going to be really honest with you. I told the shelves were empty and I told my husband Architectural Digest is coming and we just can't have empty bookshelves. So I just told him to go buy books in bulk. So she said, we just moved in. These bookshelves were empty. I knew you were coming. So my husband just bought random books to put in the shelf.
These bookshelves, I have to be honest, did not have books in it like a couple days ago. I had my husband go to a bookstore and I was like, you need to get 400 books. Obviously my husband's like, we should be like collecting books over time and putting them in the shelves. And I was like, no, not when AD comes.
Honestly, I respect that.
Yes, totally.
I did something similar to that. Like when we moved to LA for the first time, like we lived in West Hollywood and we had all these built-ins in our living room. And my husband reads all this sci-fi and nerdy shit. And I was just like, I don't really want this out on display. The covers are ugly. The spines are ugly. A lot of them are used. Like they just don't look good. So we did go to like Last Bookstore in LA and bought like a bunch of used books that were like Joan Didion and like books that had like nice, like, and I definitely, when I bought all of them, I go, I will read these, but I bought them initially for like, you know, we got to fill these bookshelves up and I don't want it to be with like, you know, Isaac Asimov or whatever books from about, you know, other planets and alien races and stuff.
My little sister, we had that moment where I was in her apartment and like she has a beautiful apartment because my little sister has excellent taste. And she had like this really great like green coffee table book on the British artist Damien Hirst. And like weirdly through a fluke of like friends of friends, Ian and I on our honeymoon were staying in a house that was owned by Damien Hirst. We don't know him. This was just like a weird...
Was it like skull shaped and encrusted in crystals?
Yeah. Weirdly, it wasn't. It was just normal. There was like no art or anything.
Boo,
Whatever.
disappointing.
But I told Hallie that. I was like, oh my God, like, do you know, like weirdly, the house we stayed at like happened to be owned by him. And she was like, oh, I don't know who that is. I just like the color of this book.
Honestly, that's the most Damien Hirst possible way to consume Damien Hirst art. That's like actually meta brilliant, I'm gonna say.
I'm only putting her like quote unquote on blast because I kind of think it's great. I'm like, it was a really pretty green color and like it's an art object, literally.
I have found a lot of times that when people start talking about art, often, I would say about 50% of the time, the conversation goes in a fun direction where I feel welcomed into a conversation about art, where I admittedly don't have like a ton of deep knowledge. And then the other 50% of the time, it's just going to be an insufferable pontification session by a person who just really wants to communicate to me that they had rich parents. And it's like this weird class, it's like this class projection where I'm just like, shut up. I don't care. It's but Damien Hirst is one of, I think he was like the person they were parodying in that movie Exit Through the Gift Shop. Do you remember that?
Well, Exit Through the Gift Shop, I thought, is about Banksy.
But I think that whatever the fake artist that they made up,
Mr. Brainwash.
Mr. Brainwash, I think, is supposed to be a parody of Damien Hirst. That's
guys, I think I'm finding out right now for the first time that Mr. Brainwash is not a real artist. I
not
thought that
real.
was just part of it. Like,
Mr. Brainwash wasn't real. Anyway, there's another thing from the internet that sticks out to me as something, as to kind of dovetail with something Dana said earlier, because it really connects with some self-loathing I have about myself. There's a Reductress headline from a few years ago that says, I was a gifted child, says 35-year-old woman again. And it sort of reminded me of how, every few years there's like this kind of upswell in gifted child discourse. And every time it comes up again, it's very annoying. Dana, you're sort of like smiling. Can you kind of like...
Any excuse to talk about my ACT score again.
What was your ACT score, Dana?
Oh, I got a 36. It's no big deal.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
is that like perfect?
That's a perfect SAT.
I took the ACT because my mom was like obsessed with the college process. And even though I lived in Connecticut and nobody took the ACT, she's like, just take it and see if you do okay. And then I did like just fine.
Or because if you were on the East Coast and you took the ACT and it was better than your SAT score, you could submit that one
Right.
instead.
That's what my mom thought. She's like, let's roll the dice. And then I think my SATs were better.
Yeah, weirdly in the Midwest, we were an ACT people.
Yeah, that's
people.
what I always heard.
And
Yeah.
some of you were perfect ACT people.
But yeah, it's like I think it like contributed to this like weird self-loathing where it's like, I should be reading the New Yorker and not on Twitter all day, and I feel like I have, my brain has rotted out of my ears and I'm a wash of wasted potential.
The gifted child discourse, I think, is, on one hand, it's like kind of, it's interesting. Like, I like to, like Dana, finding out that you got a perfect ACT score was like, that's interesting. That's an interesting thing to know about a friend. But I've also found that like sometimes people who bring up being a gifted child haven't really accomplished much since they were children. And that's sort of like the last cool thing they did. Carol, were you like a gifted kid? Was that something that you were identified as?
I think I was like on the cusp of gifted. I remember always being in like high reading groups and stuff. Like I was never great at math or anything, but I was on like my daughter is now. I can already see she's extremely verbal. Like she's ahead of the curve on verbals and talking, but like, I don't know if she's going to be able to count better than anyone else. But, so I remember feeling like the superiority of like, oh, well, I'm in like reading group 5. So like, or whatever. And I remember like, but I never was like plucked out of class to be in a gifted program or anything. But I went to like a really, really competitive public school where everybody was trying to go to Ivy League schools like the whole time. So I never would have thought that I was any smarter book-wise than other kids. I think I'm smarter in other ways, but like not, book smarter than
right.
my
Smarter at
classmates.
Avoiding being victimized by a serial killer because you've been studying.
Exactly. Or like I was always very active in stuff at school. Like I was the treasurer and the head of the yearbook and on the paper and all that stuff. And so I was like, it's okay if like I'm only getting like, if I'm getting low A's, high B's because I do all this other stuff, And I think I convinced my parents that was okay too.
Isn't it funny how much the college search like uniquely fucks everyone up? Like it kind of warps your brain permanently forever.
Like I'm already thinking about how differently I'm going to do it with my kids.
Yeah? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, like my mom I'm the oldest of 6 kids. My mom was a valedictorian of her class, but just went to a school that gave her a free ride. So she went to the University of Rochester, which is a great school, but and she went to the Eastman School of Music because she was also a piano player. She ended up going to nursing school and then medical school and became a doctor. My mom's very accomplished and I'm very proud of her, but she was just like so obsessed with the college search. And like I started looking when I was a sophomore, and then I took the PSAT and the SAT and the ACT. It was like I was in like test prep for all that stuff. And I was only 17 when I graduated high school and started college. I think it probably would have behooved me to like take a year off, be a little bit older. Like I just was 17 picking the classes I was going to take as a freshman in college. Like I had no idea. And just the pressure of going to the best one and looking at all the lists. And my school published a list of where everybody went to college.
Mm-hmm. Like, we did sort of that thing where it was like we had such a college-y school that like on the last day of school you wear your college shirt and everyone gets to be like,
Yeah, it was like in the school newspaper and I think in the town newspaper. The town newspaper put where everybody was going to college, and like it would be like taking a year off. Oh my God. You know, like you would like whisper about if someone was, and even if someone was going to UConn, which is a great school.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you play basketball.
Yeah. But if it's a state school, everybody was like, or whatever, you know, like it was so judgy. Like the whole process was so judgy. And I just feel like I'm going to just be way more lax with my kids, try to get an idea of what they want to do, like not act like college is the only thing they can do when high school's over. And, you know, I don't know, look at more in-state options because I can't afford these private schools because they're all going to be $100,000 a year when my kids go to college, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, it's just, I don't blame my mom. It's just that was like the culture, like where I grew up. Like everybody was just so obsessed.
I think gifted kid discourse came from a place of good intentions, but it did end up kind of fucking us all up individually. And like other parents that I'm seeing that are our age, Kara, have had similar, like they've said similar things to me. Like people who went all the way through school thinking like, okay, now I'm going to go to a good high school. Now I'm going to get good grades in high school. Then I'm going to take the test and test and test. And I'm going to get into the best college I can. And like focusing so much on leveraging their giftedness into some kind of collegiate outcome. I mean, that's how I was. And I look back on my college choice and I made great friends at Notre Dame. But if I were to go back in time and talk to my 17-year-old self, I would have told myself to go somewhere else. I would have told myself to go to the University of Wisconsin. Honestly, in-state tuition, great school. I love Madison a lot. It just would have been a better fit for me culturally. And but instead I was so focused on being like, you're a gifted kid, you got to do this, you got to push it to the best of your abilities, you got to go out of state, you got to do this, you got to do this. And you know, it's fine. My life turned out fine. I turned out marginally fine. But you know, when Juniper's getting older, I'm not going to funnel her the way that I was funneled by well-intentioned people, I will say. It just seems like kind of damaging. Alyssa, you look like you have something to say.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that when I was in high school, I think one of the worst things that happened was when we took the IQ test. Because you guys, it turned out that like my IQ didn't match my output in high school.
In what way?
That like I did fine. I was a very engaged person, but like schoolwork's never really been my thing. And so between like the honors, like I was in the honors program and I would do fine in the honors program. But at the end, what the teachers would do is, you know, we had the Regents program. And so I was in, for example, I was in AP chemistry. And I opted out of taking the AP because I was like, fuck it, I don't want to do the work. And then the teacher gave us the previous year's AP and I got a 5, which is the highest score. And so it's like that I was just never motivated by grades, which always made me seem lazy. Like I like the experiences. And like Erin, to your point, I at the time was like pretty disappointed when I didn't get into Cornell, Georgetown, Brown, or any other Ivy League school. But I ended up going to the University of Vermont and University of Wisconsin. And I am a great person because of it. I think I would have ended up uncool and not me had I gone someplace that required me to be competitive when I am just functionally not a competitive person. I do my own thing. Like when I took Japanese class, it was because I wanted to learn Japanese. I never thought I was going to get good grades in it, you know, but it's like made me a more interesting person. And so I'm just very lucky that my parents were like fine with that.
That is really nice.
I feel like I'm sort of the opposite, like the cautionary tale where like I was the classic like gifted kid, like pulled out of class. Like I was doing like math packets in the other room. Like,
You started like a poetry club for fun. In high
yeah, I
school?
mean, I was just
Yeah.
like a classic. I like tried to get them to teach Latin. Like, I was like a classic high school overachiever, like president of every club, straight A student, like, like sports, whatever. I like, applied early decision to Brown. It was like my dream school. I got in, and I was like, by this point, was like severely anorexic and depressed. And like my college experience, if I had taken a year off and like been in therapy, but I would have been humiliated. Like, for that reason, it was like, you got into Brown, you're going to Brown. Like, there was no off ramp for me. And I kind of wasted my college experience just being like, well, I'm smart, I have to be pre-med and like do all this. And like, I didn't have a lot of friends because I was like, I had dealing with like severe depression and eating disorder stuff. And like, it really fucked me up for a long time, where it's like, then I came out the other side not knowing how to validate myself, where I'm like, okay, well, like, what's the next like college to get into? Like, do I have to get published by this place? Do I have to get a book published? And like, for a long time, and still probably now, like, I'm always kind of chasing like, okay, well, when I have a book deal, like, okay, well, when it's a New York Times bestseller, like, okay, well, when XYZ. And I'm slowly trying to unlearn that. But I do think like that pipeline, the way it wired my brain, it has not been healthy or happy.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sounds
this
like
became a
it's-
therapy session.
No, this is great. I mean, I think that the gifted discourse and the projecting intelligence discourse kind of, we can trace it back to the like gifted kid pipeline and the harm and danger that comes from equating our own self-worth from external validation of achievements that everyone agrees are achievements.
Yeah.
And Kara, you started talking.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think that I totally hear what you're saying, Dana. And I feel like it's also because you're in this literary world, which I would imagine that like college and education carries, like that's currency there. That's really important. For me, it was so shocking when I got to New York and I was in the NBC Page program, and I would meet people that went to Princeton, but then I would meet people from schools I had never heard of. And I was like, oh, say what you will about the entertainment industry, it's filled with terrors and nightmares, but nobody really gives a shit where you went to college. Like the education aspect of it doesn't really matter. And that was kind of like refreshing to me. Like I was like, I think that's also changed my like perspective of like how I'm going to handle it with my kids is like, well, what if, sure, if they express an interest in like becoming doctors early on, yeah, that is going to make a difference. It does make a difference where you go to school, depending, for getting into a medical school and blah, blah, blah. But like, if they're like, oh, I think I want to go into entertainment, or I want to go into some of these fields where it just really isn't that big of a deal. Or like I had friends that blew all this money getting their master's in education at Ivy League schools. And it's like, you could be doing the same job you're doing right now, having gotten that if you're not going to be a principal, that was kind of a crazy move, but it's a move you made because you're from our town where your parents wanted to put a Columbia bumper sticker on their car. Like I understand. I kind of thought that was interesting when I got to the entertainment business, that nobody really cares about that kind of stuff.
My husband went to Portland State.
Yeah. And like is extremely successful.
He does great.
Like,
it's great.
Yeah.
He's also very smart and kicks
Yeah.
my ass at Trivial Pursuit all the time.
Oh,
and
my husband's
reminds
one
me-
of the my husband's one of the smartest people I know, but like grew up in West Virginia and like went to a school that gave him a free ride. Like it's just, I mean, everybody has these different circumstances, but I feel like if you talk to me at 22, I was like totally like summing people up based on where they went to school, and now I feel like it's, I've got a way different perspective on it. Do you still feel in the literary world like it's very like, oh, Brown, Harvard, like where like people want to talk, like treat you a certain way because of where you went to school?
I mean, I will also say, like, depressed as I was, like I genuinely loved Brown. Like I thought it was like an amazing school, and like I had a great academic experience there. And like, yeah, like I do get some, I think it's my own like insecurity, but like I get currency from like, I think being able to use it as a shorthand of people to be like, oh, she's smart. Like, which is my own like shallowness and insecurity. But I also do think in like meetings with people, like, general meetings, if I say, oh, I went to Brown, they're immediately like, oh, this girl writing about history is like, also they I think mentally do like put me in a smart category, which is just, I don't have to do the work for that. It's just like a shorthand.
Yeah, I wonder if the proliferation of like book talk and like social media signifying of like what, books you're consuming that are like, I don't know, more highbrow. That's not a politically correct term, but you know what I mean. People like projecting how much they're reading and what they're reading as a way to be validated as smart is a sort of like alternative way to what we've always used, which is like this harmful idea that where you go to school is like a reflection of your intelligence, or the way that we have assessed our intelligence or other people's intelligence before. Because I mean, it's sort of on one hand, it's a curated accessory that is designed to have people see you a certain way. But on the other hand, it's a way to be like, just because I didn't go to this fancy school doesn't mean that I'm not smart. It doesn't mean that I can't enjoy challenging books. It doesn't mean that like I didn't need to go to like Brown or NYU or Harvard or Yale or whatever in order to understand this and to participate in this. And so maybe like on one hand, like, books as accessories. I dated this guy once who just had this bookshelf full of books that he like had not read, and it was the most irritating. And like he would pretend to have, I don't know. He was like one of the most irritating people I've ever met. But I think that book talk isn't necessarily just like an exercise in vanity. I think that it's like a way for people to kind of like be like, I'm smart too.
They want, I mean, it's everything about social media is like finding self-worth, whether it's through connection or through community or through like projecting a version of you where you feel good about yourself. And I do think book talk is like all you need is a good camera and like a good aesthetic, and you can project a version of yourself that is smart or put together or organized or whatever you need to make you feel good about yourself.
And is there like a possibility too that book talk is almost like a backlash to like what TikTok is generally, which is like someone doing a 10-second dance move, like you can be hugely popular on TikTok by having rhythm and be gorgeous and 17. Whereas like other people are like, well, we're going to take back TikTok and like make it about like things that are actually, or do you think I'm putting too much on it and that these people don't even read the books? I don't know.
No,
I don't really know a lot about book talk.
I also will say a lot of book talk is like what probably like Twitter, New York literary world would consider like less sophisticated books. Like it's a lot of like YA and like romance and like elves and like fantasy, like that sort of like romance fantasy adjacent things. And so I think it also is this like reclamation of like, oh, we get to feel good about ourselves too, just because we're not reading Thomas Pynchon. Like we can feel like bookish. We can feel like Belle in Beauty and the Beast reading Colleen Hoover, which like you should. That's great. You should feel good about yourself doing whatever you like to do.
Our associate producer, Fiona, brought something interesting up as we were kind of narrowing down this topic. And that was that having an analog life, a life outside of social media, is now something that is kind of like a thing to brag about, because we've all been so like consumed by existing in this online space and feeling like we're constantly performing. To be able to read is to have time to yourself where you're actually, you're like, hey guys, look, I exist outside of this space. I have an analog life and this is how I'm choosing to spend time, instead of just completely sucked into this social media world, which I think is an interesting trend, and probably troublesome to people who own stock in Meta, that more young people are just like, I exist elsewhere. And it's a kind of way to assert that as well.